Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Alex Shelbrooke. Number one, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Shelbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during the general election, my blue-collar conservatism resonated very well with my constituents in and they are very keen that the economic recovery carries on track. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that what we must achieve in this Parliament is lower taxation for working people, higher minimum wage, and ensuring that the lowest paid are taken out of tax altogether to show that we are a true one-nation government?
First of all, congratulate my honourable friend on his return to the House with, I think, doubling his majority. There are a number of results in his part of Yorkshire that I took a particular interest in and was pleased to see happen. He's absolutely right that at the heart of our plan is making work pay. That is the best way to help people out of poverty, the best way to give people more security, creating jobs, cutting taxes, seeing increases in the minimum wage and legislating so that people working 30 hours on minimum wage don't pay income tax. That's our plan for working people.
Harriet Harman.
We all agree about the importance of home ownership, and the Prime Minister has said he's going to increase it. Can he tell us, since he became Prime Minister in 2010, has the percentage of people owning their own home gone up or gone down?
Well, it's been a very challenging time for people to buy their own homes, but what we're responsible for is almost 100,000 people able to buy their own homes because of the right to buy and because of Help to Buy, two schemes opposed by Labour.
Harriet Harman.
The answer is that since he became Prime Minister, the percentage of people who own their own home has fallen. Now, he mentioned his plan to extend the right to buy to housing association tenants. He's promised, under this new scheme, the replacement of sold-off properties on a one-for-one basis. He promised that on council homes in the last Parliament. Can he remind us whether he kept that promise?
Well, first of all, if she's complaining about home ownership, will she confirm she'll support the extension of the right to buy to housing associations? Will you support that approach? Will you support that? There we are, there we have it. A landmark manifesto commitment. Let's expand the right to buy to housing associations, but as ever, the enemies of aspiration in the Labour Party won't support it.
We support more people owning their own home, which is not what happened under the last 5 years of him being Prime Minister. We support more people having an affordable home as well, and that didn't happen under the last 5 years of him being Prime Minister either. He promised for every council home sold, another one would be built. That did not happen. For every 10 sold, there's only been one built. And less affordable housing means people have to be in more expensive private rented accommodation, which means a higher housing benefit bill. Can he confirm that for every affordable home sold and not replaced, the housing benefit bill goes up?
Well, first of all, we built more council homes in the last 5 years than were built under 13 years of the last Labour government. But look, I say to the Honourable Lady, she can't ask these questions about supporting home ownership unless she answers the simple question, will you back housing association tenants being able to buy their homes? Yes or no?
He broke his promise on a replacement one-for-one of affordable council homes. He broke that promise, and as a result, housing benefit has gone up. And at the same time, he says he wants to take £12 billion out of welfare. So where is it coming from? Earlier this week, his spokesperson confirmed the government would not make any changes to child benefit, and that's a commitment for the whole of this Parliament. Can he confirm that now?
Prime Minister.
We made very clear our position on child benefit in the election. I confirm that again at the dispatch box. But let's be clear, absolutely no answer from the Labour Party about housing association tenants. We're clear, they should have the right to buy. So we can now see the new Labour backing of aspiration after the election. It's lasted 3 weeks. That's how long they've given to aspiration. Let me give her another chance. We say housing association tenants get the right to buy. What does she say?
Well, his commitment not to cut child benefit during the course of this Parliament has not even lasted a few days. That's what his spokesperson said, and he's not been committed to it. Can he tell us about another issue of importance to families, which is whether he's going to rule out further cuts to working families' tax credits?
Well, again, we've said we're freezing tax credits in the next 2 years because we need to get the deficit down and we want to keep people's taxes down. But isn't it interesting that the whole of the last Parliament, Labour came here and opposed every single spending reduction, every single welfare saving, and they've learnt absolutely nothing. They are still the party of more spending, more welfare, more debt. It's extraordinary. The two people responsible for this great policy of theirs, one of them lost the election, the other one lost his seat. The messengers have gone, but the message is still the same.
He promised £12 billion of welfare cuts, and I'm asking where those welfare cuts are coming from. Mr. Speaker, before an election, it's about the promises. Now they're in Downing Street, it's about the delivery. The Prime Minister spent the last 5 years saying everything that was wrong was because of the previous Prime Minister. Well, he can't do that for the next 5 years because the last Prime Minister was him. I hope he'll bear in mind when things go wrong over the next Prime Minister, next 5 years, there's no one responsible but him.
Well, first of all, we're still clearing up the mess her government left behind. But look, the Honourable Lady asked for an example of a welfare cut. Let me give her one. We think we should cut the welfare cap from £26,000 per household to £23,000 per household. Now, in her speech, in reply to the gracious speech, it sounded like she was going to come out and support that. So why not? Let's see how Labour are going to approach this. Will you support a cut in the welfare cap?
The Right Honourable and Learned Lady has had her 6 questions and... Everyone should be clear about that. Mr. Andrew Mitchell.
My right honourable friend will be well aware that there is considerable concern on both sides of the House at the proposition that Britain might withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. Will he take the opportunity today to make clear that he has no plans for us to do so?
We're very clear about what we want, which is British judges making decisions in British courts, and also the British Parliament being accountable to the British people. Now, our plans set out in our manifesto don't involve us leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, but let's be absolutely clear. If we can't achieve what we need, and I'm very clear about that, when we've got these foreign criminals convicting offence after offence and we can't send them home because of their right to a family life, that needs to change. And I rule out absolutely nothing in getting that done.
Mr. Angus Robertson.
Timely death of Charles Kennedy. I know we are making tributes a little bit later. It's a stain on the conscience of Europe that thousands and thousands of refugees have been dying in the Mediterranean when many lives could have been saved. Does the Prime Minister agree that the role of the Royal Navy, of the Italian Coast Guard and of the navies of other European countries is making a profound difference? However, much more needs to be done, including offering refuge and asylum to those who need it.
Well, first of all, he's right to mention Charles Kennedy, and we'll have those tributes rightly after Prime Minister's questions. He's also right to praise the role of the Royal Navy in dealing with this tragedy in the Mediterranean. HMS Bulwark, the flagship of the Royal Navy, has been playing an absolutely key role in saving lives. But I would part company with him on his next suggestion. What we need to do in order to solve this crisis is two things. One, we need a government in Libya that we can work with so that it's possible to return people to Africa and stop this criminal trade taking place. And second, we need to break the link between getting on a boat and achieving residence in Europe. That's what needs to be done. In the meantime, everything Britain can do as a moral and upstanding nation to save lives, we will do, and we should be proud that we are doing it.
Angus Robertson.
And 80 years ago, that's what the United Kingdom did when it offered refuge and asylum to those who were being pursued by the Nazis. And we all know about the Kinder transport and the children that were accepted and given refuge in the UK. Now, in contrast, however, the UK has an appalling record on the resettlement of Syrian refugees and is not prepared to cooperate with other European nations on accepting refugees that have been rescued in the Mediterranean. Why does the Prime Minister think that it is fair for Sweden and for Germany and other countries to accept these refugees while the UK turns its back on them?
Well, first of all, I would take issue with the honourable gentleman that we have an asylum system and a record of giving people asylum in this country that we should be proud of. When people are fleeing torture and persecution, they can find a home here in Britain. But let's be clear, the vast majority of people who are setting off into the Mediterranean are not asylum seekers, but are people seeking a better life. They've been tricked and fooled by criminal gangs, and our role should be going after those criminal gangs, sorting out the situation in Libya, turning back those boats where we can, and making sure with our generous aid budget that this government achieved 0.7%, that we use that money to mend the countries from which these people are coming. That is our moral responsibility and what I'm proud to fulfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the careful financial stewardship of this government, York's economy continues to grow, with unemployment a fraction of what it was 5 years ago. However, can the Prime Minister assure me that with his offer of devolution, that it will percolate right the way through the great county of Yorkshire, empowering rural communities as well as cities like York to deliver a Yorkshire powerhouse that rivals Manchester and London?
I can certainly give my honourable friend that assurance. I mean, he talks about the strength of the Yorkshire economy, the claimant count in his own constituency, the people claiming unemployment benefit in his constituencies, come down by 74% since 2010. In terms of the Northern Powerhouse, what we see is the linking up of the great northern cities as a counterpoint and a counterpoise to the strength of London. We're making good progress with that, but certainly, yes, we want to see more money, more resources and more powers devolved to those cities. And if we take, for instance, the York, North Yorkshire and East Riding local growth deal, that's creating about at least 3,000 jobs, allowing 4,000 homes to be built. So we made good progress, but there's more to be done in this Parliament.
Uranka Davis.
Mr. Speaker, in March, the Prime Minister rightly apologised for successive governments who had failed to address properly those claims and those righteous indignation of the family whose lives were torn apart and those who lost their lives in the contaminated blood scandal. He also said, in response to a question, that he would deal with this as a matter of priority if he was re-elected. Could I ask him now to update us on his commitment to that and progress on that, so that this was dealt with finally and fulsomely for all those people who have lost their lives and those who live with the damage caused by this scandal?
No, well, I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for raising this issue. All of us, as members of Parliament, have come across people who, for no fault of their own, were infected with blood, with either HIV or hepatitis C, and have had very serious consequences for them. In terms of what we're going to do about it, the member for the SNP shouts from a sedentary position. Well, I said very clearly before the election, we've made available £25 million to help those families, and there will be a full statement by the government before the summer recess to make sure that we deal with this in the best way we possibly can.
David T.C. Davis.
Mr. Speaker, a national health... Mr. Speaker, a national health service free at the point of use was at the heart of the Conservative general election campaign. Would the Prime Minister confirm that he will continue to deliver the shorter waiting times, better ambulance response times, better access to cancer drugs and more funding, which makes the NHS not just the envy of the world, but of my own constituents in Monmouthshire?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for what he says. I can absolutely say to him, under this government, the NHS will remain free at the point of use, and more to the point, we are backing the Simon Stevens plan with an extra £8 billion of spending, a commitment that the Labour Party still refused to make. But that's not surprising when you look at the Labour record in Wales, where they have cut the NHS in stark contrast to the decision that we made to increase investment in the NHS. And that's why you see in the Welsh NHS performance worse figures on A&E, on waiting times, on cancer. And I would urge the Labour Party in Wales, even at this late stage, change your approach, do a U-turn, put the money into the NHS like we're doing in England.
Adrian Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The fragility of our economic recovery in my constituency is demonstrated by the impending closure of Dixon Carphone, with the loss of 500 jobs and £8 million to the local economy. Will the Prime Minister intervene to keep Wednesbury working to save these jobs, or at the very least ensure that the company provides appropriate compensation and support for employees to secure alternative employment?
Minister.
Well, I look very closely at the case that he mentions, and obviously everything that Job Centre Plus can do to find employment for those people should be done. He talks, though, about the fragility of the economy. In his own constituency, the claimant count has actually fallen by a third over the last year. So there are jobs being made available, but as I say, where Job Centre Plus can help with finding people work, we'll certainly make sure they do.
John Barron.
The UN Secretary-General has described the refugee situation in Jordan and Lebanon as the worst humanitarian crisis of our time. What more can Britain do, in tandem with other countries, to help relieve the suffering and to learn from the lessons of history to ensure that poorly resourced refugee camps don't become breeding grounds for extremism?
Well, I think the first thing that we can do is to continue our investment using our aid budget as, I think, the second largest bilateral donor in terms of providing refugee support, refugee camps, whether in Jordan or elsewhere in the region. We should continue with that. But clearly, the answer to this problem is to allow those people to go back home, whether to Iraq or to Syria. So what we need is a government in both those countries that can represent and work with all of their people. Now, there's some progress in Iraq with the Abadi government, and we need to make sure they can represent Sunnis as well as Shias. In Syria, the situation is far, far worse, but we should still be continuing with the plan with others of training the moderate Syrian opposition and trying to bring about a transition so we get rid of the Assad regime and Assad himself, who is one of the biggest drivers of terror in the region because of what he's done to his people. That is the strategy we should pursue for however long it takes to succeed.
Cat Smith.
Can the Prime Minister inform the House when he expects the UK to regain its AAA credit rating?
Well, first of all, can I welcome the Honourable Lady to her place and congratulate her on her election success. And if I might say, I think the first question she asked, which is about fiscal responsibility and sustainability, I take that as a sign of progress. I would say to her, there's a leadership election on. I'd throw your hat in the ring. In that one question, she's made more sense than all the rest of them put together. Go for it.
Mrs. Drummond.
A push for greater diversity in employment is a key part of my plan for Portsmouth. Can the Prime Minister assure my constituents that the leasing of part of the dockyard to Magna Structures can be confirmed in due course, because we look forward to welcoming yet another high-tech company to the city?
Well, First of all, can I congratulate my honourable friend on her election success and for standing up already for Portsmouth and all the work she did as a candidate and all the things I know she'll do as a Member of Parliament. We're absolutely committed to ensuring the Portsmouth Ship Hall is used in the most effective way to deliver capability, to create jobs and to boost growth in the region. And I have to say to her, I think that actually the developments in Portsmouth at the moment are exciting, whether that is ship servicing, whether it's welcoming the carriers when they come to Portsmouth, or whether it's the Ben Ainslie Centre that is being constructed with government support. And also, can I just say how good it is that Portsmouth is going to be represented in this place by strong Conservative women.
Mr. Speaker, in the gracious speech by Her Majesty last week, the Government committed to legislating to implement the Stormont House Agreement, and as he knows, that agreement has our full support in the DUP. It is an agreement that was signed up to by all the 5 main parties in Northern Ireland and the British and Irish governments. Now that it has been reneged on, certainly the welfare reform aspect, by Sinn Féin, now that vulnerable people are being hurt, public services hit as a result of £2 million a week fines being implemented and a black hole in the Northern Ireland budget, does he agree with his Secretary of State, following the talks yesterday, that all the parties who signed up to that agreement, SDLP and Sinn Féin included, should now implement it? And if they fail to do so, will he take steps to preserve the integrity of that agreement?
Well, first of all, let me agree with the right honourable gentleman that everyone who was party to those talks, and they were exhaustive and lengthy talks ending in an agreement, everyone should implement that agreement in full. And that agreement did include welfare reform. That is the first point, and he's absolutely right. Look, whatever happens, we need to make sure that Northern Ireland and the Assembly has a sustainable and deliverable budget. And so I hope that even at this late stage, people can look at what they can do to make sure that happens.
Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year saw record numbers of adoptions and prospective adopters, but there are still over 3,000 children in care waiting to be adopted, half of them having waited for over 18 months. What plans does my right honourable friend, who has a strong commitment on this issue, have to enable more children to be placed in a loving, stable family home sooner rather than later?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this. I think speeding up the rate at which adoptions take place and making sure more adoptions can take place is absolutely key to giving more children a better start in life. Now, over the last 3 years, we've seen a 63% increase in adoption, so we have made progress. But in the gracious speech and in the bill being published today, there are the plans to create regional adoption agencies, bringing together the many agencies there are in this country. And I think that's right, because it matters far more that a child gets a loving home than whether that home is actually in a particular county council area. So let's get on, create these agencies and make sure more adoptions take place.
Tom Blenkinsop.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The UK steel industry is a key foundation industry to Britain, but it's in crisis. Will the Prime Minister join me and the rest of the steel APPG to call upon the leadership in Mumbai to directly intervene on this situation and get their colleagues in Tata Europe to get back around the table and avoid the worst crisis in the steel industry, which we could potentially see in 35 years?
Well, I agree with the honourable gentleman that it's very important the government talks intensively to the leaders of the steel industry, Tata in particular, about what we can do to try and make sure we safeguard the growth and the jobs that there have been in the steel industry over previous years. We've started those discussions. We've had discussions, for instance, about the steps we're taking for our high energy, intensive energy industries and the help that we can give. But at the heart of a successful steel industry is always going to be a successful economy and a successful construction industry, which is why we should stick to the long-term economic plan.
Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, today Tidal Lagoon Power, headquartered in Gloucester, announces that China Harbour Engineering is the preferred bidder for a £300 million investment in the world's first ever tidal lagoon in Swansea Bay. There'll be a high content from the UK in the supply chain, and there's a commitment to pursue tidal projects together in Asia. This confirms our ability both to attract Chinese investment and create new export opportunities. Does my right honourable friend share my hope that the Energy Secretary will soon agree the development consent order needed and also agree soon on the pricing of power from this exciting example of British innovation and engineering?
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise this specific case, but also the general case of wanting to attract Chinese investment into Britain. And we've seen something like a 73% increase between 2010 and 2013. And that is partly because this government has pursued Chinese investment and attracted Chinese investment into Britain. On the specific case of the Swansea tidal lagoon, it's obviously subject to a planning decision, but I think tidal power does have significant potential. I've seen some of the plans for myself, and I hope this is something we can make progress on, and obviously attracting investment into the country to help make it happen is a win-win for both countries.
Diane Abbott.
Devolution of powers to our nations, our regions and great cities will be one of the themes of this Parliament. But does the Prime Minister accept that Londoners, under their elected mayor, will expect at least the same powers that are being devolved to the Northern Powerhouse?
Well, I think it's a very powerful point the Honourable Lady makes, and there's been an ongoing discussion with the Mayor of London about what more powers can be. Well, he's running London, that's where he is, and he's doing a very, very good job. He's doing an excellent job. Very good. But I think the Honourable Lady's right, and we have devolved powers to London, and we're very happy to go on having discussions about transport and about other economic powers to make sure London has created 500,000 more jobs over the last 5 years. It's a staggering performance, and we want that to continue.
Lynn Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that any onshore wind farm proposal not already granted planning permission should not expect to receive any public subsidy?
Well, I'm very glad to see my honourable friend back in his place. He campaigned very hard on this in the last Parliament, and in our manifesto we're very, very clear there should be no more subsidies for the onshore wind farms. It is time to give local people the decisive say. That is what will happen in England. In Wales, obviously the subsidy regime will be changed because it is a reserved issue. So I think that his desire has been met.
Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister might be aware of the ongoing case of my constituent, Dr. Steve Foreman, who, despite his immense contribution to the music and creative scene in Glasgow, Scotland and around the world, the Home Office are seeing fit to try to deport back to the United States. Can the Prime Minister tell the House why people like Dr. Foreman don't seem to be welcome in this country? Because if the Prime Minister can't run an immigration policy that works for Scotland, then I know a government up the road that would be very happy to take on the job.
First of all, can I congratulate the honourable gentleman on his election? I'm not aware of the specific case that he raises, but I will look at it urgently after Prime Minister's questions and see what I can do.
Mr. Peter Bone. Mr. Speaker, would the Prime Minister agree that one of the ways forward in the European Union is to have two pillars? The first being countries that want a single currency, a common fiscal policy, and ever closer political union. The second pillar being countries that want none of those, but instead want a free trade area, a common market.
No, I think my honourable friend makes a good point. One of the arguments being held in Europe at the moment is to try and get people to accept what is already the case, which is there are countries like Britain at the heart of the single market, but not involved in the Schengen Agreement, nor likely to join it, not involved in the single currency, and in my view should never join it. And we should accept that this sort of flexibility is here to stay. And I think the challenge for Europe is to build a European community that is flexible enough for the single currency countries to be happy that their problems and issues can be sorted out, but flexible enough for countries like Britain at the heart of the single market, but not wanting to be part of that ever closer union, can also be comfortable with their membership. That is the aim of my renegotiation, and it will be followed by an in-out referendum.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's confirmation that there will be no cuts in the rates of or eligibility conditions for child benefit. Will he also confirm the commitment he made during the election that there will be no cuts in the benefits paid for disabled people?
Well, what we've actually done is increase the benefits paid to disabled people by bringing in the personal independence payment, which is actually more generous to those who are most disabled. Can I say how much I enjoyed meeting with him during the general election, where we both addressed the Festival of Life in the Excel Centre in his constituency? And I don't know about him, but it's certainly the only time in my life I've talked to 45,000 people at the same time, and I suspect the same goes for him.
Daniel Kaczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has already referred to Libya earlier on. We have exchanged views and had many debates on Libya since our military involvement in that country in 2011. And yet the situation is getting worse and worse. What new steps and initiatives is he going to bring in conjunction with allies Egypt and Italy to ensure that this situation is resolved?
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this, and there'll be some discussions at the G7 in Germany this weekend. We've got to a position where Special Representative Leon from the United Nations has been bringing everybody together to try and form a national unity government, and we need to give everything we can to support that process, because then there is some prospect of Libya having a government. From a government can then flow some security, and from security can flow the ability to start to deal with this migrant crisis in the way that I was discussing earlier.
Rachel Maskell.
Under the Right to Buy plan, 3 social houses will need to be sold to generate enough revenue to build 1 new one, leaving 1,500 families in York without a home for well over 2 years. Is this what the Prime Minister means by aspiration?
Well, first of all, let me welcome the Honourable Lady to the House and congratulate her on her election victory. There are 2 things that we're doing to provide these replacement houses. One is obviously for every housing association that sells a home, it has that receipt and is able to build a new house. But also, we're making sure that councils actually sell off the most expensive council houses they have when they become vacant. In parts of London, there are council houses worth over £1 million, and you can build many, many more houses. But what's clear from this question time is on this side of the House, we understand home ownership, aspiration, people wanting to get on. The party opposite, after the most catastrophic election defeat in years, can't even begin to spell aspiration.
Order.